Hey, New Lifers. I don't believe we've ever met, but my name is Jared. I am a church planter in Des Moines, Iowa. My wife and I recently moved from Indiana to Des Moines, which is where I am right now. So it's kind of a cloudy, overcast day. When you live in Iowa, it's basically you're basically quarantined all of winter from like December into March. And so for us, this quarantine is kind of just has been like an extension of winter. So it's been fun. But we live in Des Moines, Iowa, and I know church planting is such a big part of New Life's heart. And so that's why I wanted to study the Word with you all today, wherever you're watching this from, whether it's on Facebook or wherever, or online, wherever you are on their website, wherever you're watching this from. I wanted to dive into the Word with you, and I'm going to be in Psalm chapter 13. I know church planting is a big part of New Life's heart and DNA, and this season of life has had a lot of ups and downs. It's been really good in a lot of ways for my wife Rachel and myself, where we've had a lot of quality time together that we haven't normally had in the past. We've had a lot of great quality time with family. We have learned a lot through the challenges about ourselves, which for us is good. That's a good thing. A lot about our marriage. We've seen God's provision in multiple ways than we've ever, in some incredible ways that's really inexplainable, other than that was God. And so we've seen His faithfulness over and over and over again, like we've never expected or we've ever seen before. But then on the other side, in the same breath, the season of life has been really hard. There's some things about church planting that we weren't ready for, we weren't expecting, and not in a good way. Our girls have been really sick, like little things like that. We've had some financial hardships. Like when you live on fundraising, that's hard enough in and of itself. But then we've had to go through some stuff with fundraising that a lot of church planners and missionaries hopefully don't have to experience. But then also, like back in November, I lost my grandfather. And that was kind of unexpected, and that was a hard time, and our family just kind of pressed pause and to get together and celebrate his life. And I remember at the funeral, me and my siblings and some of my cousins, we were all asked who wants to sing a song or a couple songs at the funeral. So a few of us did, and most cousins didn't. And when we sang at the funeral, I remember looking out and just feeling like, and I don't know if I was expecting other people to sing, but I remember looking out and going, nobody else is singing right now. And I think that may be the case at most funerals, because the mood at a funeral is kind of heartbreak. It's loss. There's this melancholy, this kind of drab mood, this tone, and the room is just down, depressed. And most people don't really feel like singing. And I think that idea is something that I've been able to relate to a lot in this season of church planting, this season of life for us in church planting. Is there's been several moments of life recently where I've just kind of been like, I don't really feel like singing. And maybe not actually singing, but I think that communicates joy. And there's been several moments where it's just like, I don't really feel like singing through this. And maybe for you can relate to that. Maybe for you right now, you're wrestling with anxiety over this pandemic, and you're wrestling with financial stress. Maybe you've lost your job, or you've lost all of your savings for retirement, and you're not even sure that's going to happen. And you're stressed out. Maybe you have questions and you're doubting everything. You're doubting God. You're doubting your faith. Maybe you're doubting the public sector. Maybe you're wrestling with anger. Maybe you're just in a season of life right now that has nothing to do with the pandemic, but there's other things that are broken, and you're hurting, and you just don't really feel like singing. Well, I think this is what happens in Psalm 13. And this is what I wanted to look at, because the author David writes this psalm, and I feel like this is what he expresses, is this life situation he's in where he just doesn't really feel the joy that should come with quote-unquote singing. So I wanted to read this with us, but with you. So Psalm 13, look for the big number 13, and I'm going to read right from the beginning there. This is what David writes. He says, "How long, Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? How long must I wrestle with my thoughts and day after day have sorrow in my heart? How long will my enemy triumph over me? Look on me and answer, Lord my God. Give light to my eyes, or I will sleep in death, and my enemies will say, I have overcome him, and my foes will rejoice when I fall. And I feel like you can hear David's anxiety, his anger, his frustration, his almost depression at this thought of God seems absent. He seems inactive. So he begs God, he yells at him, "How long, Lord, until you do something? Will you forget us forever? Is there ever any hope in this situation?" And that's what his mentality is. And maybe that's what your mentality is right now. And his mentality is, how long, Lord, until you do something? Even that last word there at the end of verse 4, where he says, "My foes will rejoice when I fall." That the word, it's not meaning necessarily die or death, but it actually, another translation in the ESV, it translates it as, "My foes will rejoice when I am shaken." It's this inner core being so shaken in the depths of your inner being, almost like the feeling of like what an egg must feel when you take an egg and you shake it up, what that yolk is going through. That's what he's feeling. And it's maybe that's a place for you right now that you've experienced, and your mentality is not at a place where you really feel like singing. Here's the thing. David doesn't write, like, there's not a psalm that follows up this where David writes later on, he's like, "Hey guys, I finally got an answer from God." He responded and said it's just going to be a couple more weeks or a month later, right? We'll be free by Easter. Like, it's not what he writes, right? But he says, but here's what I want you to hear. The psalm doesn't end there. There's 2 more verses. And I want to read this. Verse 5, it says, "But I trust in your unfailing love. My heart rejoices in your salvation." And then he says, you can almost see him writing this through clenched teeth. "I will sing the Lord's praise, for he has been good to me." I will sing because the Lord has been good to me. He says in verses 1 through 4, when his mentality is anger and anxiety and doubts and uncertainty, verses 5 and 6, his melody remains the same. See, even when his mentality changes, his melody never changes, and his melody is Christ. One of the hardest part of this whole church planting season for us actually happened about a month ago. My wife had an emergency surgery. We found out that she had been having pains for a while, and then got progressively worse and worse, where we had to rush her to the hospital. And we found out that we were pregnant, and we sat on that news. We didn't know that. We sat on that news for a couple hours, and then the ultrasound came back, and we found out that it was an ectopic pregnancy, which means it's a pregnancy that takes place outside of the womb, so there's 0 chance of survival for the fetus. So we had some options. Are we going to give her this medicine to kill the cells, or are we going to have surgery and remove it? And because if there's nothing that's done, then it could take my wife's life. And so we went the medicine route. And actually, we gave her the medicine and stayed overnight. They discharged us the next day, and we went home. And the doctors were pretty certain that like this will take care of it. So this will cure her, so to speak. And so we went home just kind of like, what happened? Where did this come from? And that night I was actually flying out to Vegas for a church planting trip. And when I touched down in Vegas, at the Vegas airport, I'm getting texts and calls from my mom saying they rushed my wife back to the hospital because her pain came back and it was worse. And when I touched her on the ground, she was actually already in surgery. The doctors told us that if in third world countries, people die from this all the time if it's not treated right away, because there's really no telling how much longer you have left to live once it bursts. And so she was in surgery. And I remember being in that airport, states hundreds of miles away, thousands of miles away from my wife, just feeling angry and feeling a loss of control and feeling like, God, why would you do this to us? And I remember feeling almost what David's feeling here, like, how much longer, God, do we have to keep wrestling with this? Why did this happen? Where are you? Even in verse 3 where he says, look at me and answer, God. I felt that. And but the thing is, the difference between me and David is my mentality was there, but I didn't remember my melody. My mentality was anger and frustration and doubt. And my melody, I didn't lean into my melody. And that's my challenge for you, is that even when your mentality changes, that your melody would never change. Even when you don't feel like singing, keep on singing. Because the only reason you may have to sing is because God still loves you. Make your melody Christ. And he even says in verse 5, I trust in your unfailing love. Do not put your trust in anything else but in God's unfailing love. Do not put your trust in what the president says. Do not put your trust in doctors. Do not put your trust in a vaccine even. Do not put your trust in your financial situation. Do not put your trust. Put your trust in God's unfailing love. Because don't you see what that means? Is that God had a choice, God didn't, in a way, he didn't have to sacrifice his son. He could have chosen either to wipe out all of his creation or to put his son on a cross. And see, the choice was made that what God did is he picked you because of his unfailing love. Jesus had a choice. He didn't necessarily have to go to the cross. He even begged God to get him out of it. But the thing is, Jesus could have said a single word and he would have came down from that cross. But the thing is, the nails in his hands and his feet are not what hung him to the cross. They're not what kept him there. What kept him on the cross was his unfailing love. And that's what David says to put your trust in. How much he loves you. You are not forgotten. Your anxiety will not overcome you. Put your trust in the Father. Take your anxiety and lay your anxiety before the Father, not before the Facebook. Put all of your trust in him because he will never fail you. He loves you.